William Wilberforce did more to turn his nation to righteousness and to defend the oppressed than many of the greatest men of God. It would be well for us to consider his example. His childhood was harshly interrupted by death. The death of his dearly loved father, followed almost immediately by the death of his eldest sister. His youngest sister also, who he thought was one of the sweetest children ever born, died when she was 8 years old. During a prolonged illness of his mother, he stayed with his aunt and uncle, who were devout Methodists. During this time, he became very close to John Newton, a former slave trader who had become an honorable man of God.
My mother sees your religious enthusiasm as poisonous, and now that she is well, she may take me away. If I must leave, I want you to know that I think of you as my father.
His mother did take him away, and labored diligently to teach him worldliness, luxury, and apathy. At first, this life was repugnant to him. But he was well liked. He was friendly, generous, eloquent, and sociable. Though he neglected work and study, he was intelligent and learned long poems by heart.
Poverty's unconquerable bar, in life's low vale remote hath pined alone, then drops into the grave, unpitied and unknown.
But he began to be more at ease in the lap of luxury and high society. He rented a pew in a Unitarian church in London, and stood clear of anything resembling overzealous enthusiasm. He entered more deeply into the life of the upper class, joining 5 different clubs, splendid and profligate places, given to fashionable discourse and dissipation. And so by degrees he became, as he said, as thoughtless as any amongst them. His faith faded away like a river in a drought, becoming a socially acceptable, distant, deistic notion. But God had not forgotten him, and so a chance meeting and a chance finding of a book began in him what he called the Great Change. A man named Isaac Milner, by providential circumstance, became Wilberforce's traveling companion. This is a man of God, who had also a position and education in common with Wilberforce, and by this was able to cross the barriers of Wilberforce's mind to reach his soul. A book which was left lying on a table, and which Wilberforce took up at random, fundamentally altered his distorted view of Christianity. This book was named The Rise and Progress of Religion in the Soul. Wilberforce later told his son, "You cannot read a better book." At last, more patiently than any human influence, God brought Wilberforce back to himself, more deeply than ever before. After his conversion, he sought to meet privately with John Newton, to seek his help and counsel concerning the direction he should take, and whether he should abandon his social position and high standing to join a holy order.
Your position and your influence are gifts from God. Now that you serve Him, you should use them for His purposes.
But what purposes?
He took up many causes, setting about to reform every facet of his country. But his hardest and greatest endeavor was the overthrow of the vast and blood-bathed system of the English slave trade. This brought him together with a man named Olaudah Equiano, a former slave who had become a writer and a champion of freedom. Wilberforce faced every evil he could find, standing against drunkenness, obscenity, child labor, cruelty to animals. From every direction he shone into his country's darkness, so that no shadow could survive unexposed or unchallenged. He turned all that God had given him, his intellect, social standing, and readiness of tongue, to the service of his Savior, making enemies of friends and friends of enemies. He wrote and spoke his word deep into the conscience of his countrymen, in high and low places.
In opening, concerning the nature of the slave trade, I need only observe that it is found by experience to be just such as every man who uses his reason would infallibly conclude it to be. For my own part, so clearly am I convinced of the mischiefs inseparable from it, that I should hardly want any further evidence than my own mind would furnish by its most simple deductions. Facts, however, are now laid before the House.
He was a picture of the diligence that should be seen in every Christian, and for centuries to come the world will bear the mark he left. He ruled his tongue for the glory of God. He mastered the soft answer and the light of reproof. He also increasingly applied himself to reading, and did more than counterbalance the years in which he had neglected his studies. He soon carried an almost ridiculous amount of books with him wherever he went. As a friend described him, he kindled at the very sight of books. Within his life he saw the slave trade abolished, and heard that slavery itself would be abolished 3 days before his death. He was buried in Westminster Abbey. When we remember a man who has wrought with God, we must remember not to merely applaud his work, but open our eyes to the work that is laid before us by the grace and command of our Saviour.